Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire show. And my guest today is Mike Zizis, who's an astrologer. When you choose someone to read your horoscope, you give that person a trust. More than 20 years ago, Michael began a life of bridge building. You trust that the bridge over the turbulence called life will get you safely and maybe even in an inspirational, breathtaking way where you are going. Coming to Michael for a consultation, whether tarot, astrology, or the I Ching, enables you to establish a bridge to the unknown, a carefully constructed piece of workmanship to carry you forward with the certainty that knowledge is power. Michael has the care and concern that thousands of people have come to trust and return to time after time. And now I will read something from Michael's website. Since prehistoric times, humankind has attempted to fathom its unearthly experience. Their first gesture toward this understanding may well have been a cave dweller lifting his or her eyes towards the heavens in wonder and speculation of forthcoming events. Observations were made regarding how Mother Nature mirrored events in the heavens. Shellfish activity and the rhythm of the tides coincided with the phase of the moon. Seafaring peoples, lacking compasses, used the North Star and other constellations for navigation. Mike, thank you for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure indeed. Thank you, and it's a real honor.
Today we had a little of a challenge with the connection, so we are using Skype instead of the regular Zoom. Hopefully we'll manage that. And I'll start by asking why astrology and something and not something else.
We are connected. We are all connected to each other through love, through commerce, through health. We're a social species. The reason that the Neanderthals seem to have failed, and we are the surviving hominid or hominin, is because we loved living in social groups. We exchanged ideas. We grew groups much larger, and we were connected to the climate, the environment. So astrology is basically agricultural. It's all about the way the environment allows us to eat, to feed our children, to grow together. And when we look up to the sky, we see the bright new moon and the moon getting larger. What we're looking at is creatures beginning to change, evolve, and gather because of, let's say, lunation cycles of brightening and decay. Also, the four seasons are all about spring being seeds and growth and the return of the salmon and the return of the deer and the return of the antelope and whatever else we were eating, berries and seeds, and we feasted. So someone started taking notes. Many people started taking notes about this. And about 10,000 years ago, when we started putting seeds in the ground, those ingenious women and men started noticing that when we put seeds in the ground during a new moon, the crop grew. And this took many, many generations. And we fed the kids. And when we put seeds in the ground, because we're no longer just chasing animals, we put seeds in the ground during a decaying moon, the seeds seemed to be weak and sickly, and they would often fail, and the village would starve. So that's truly the beginning of astrology. And every person has a springtime of their career, a springtime of their job cycle, a springtime of love, a summer of health, and a winter of a health cycle. And then, of course, it begins again. So very, very basically, if you look at seeds, we're always planting seeds. Seeds is our health. Seeds are money. Seeds are connection. That's truly how astrology began. And I want to point out to you as clearly as I can, astrology, the planets don't do anything. Birdsong heralds spring, but birdsong isn't making spring. A doorbell chimes, and it doesn't make someone appear at the doorbell. So these are heralds and symbols. So that's how we read the skies to say, right now, we're at the cycle of a new moon. So the season is beginning to stabilize. We had nice days, and then we had days of frost and cloudiness and cold. And because we're in a stable sign called Taurus, by May, even in this north part of the north, things will stabilize. So that revolution of cycles repeating endlessly truly is astrology. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, but also astrology is a journey into the deep truth of ourselves, isn't it?
Yes, yes. It's also because astrology is a living, evolving journey. We've also learned from the psychologists to adapt psychological insights into how we appear. So the birth chart, the position of the planets when you take your first scream at the light and breathe the world in, breathe the universe in, that's a snapshot called astrology. So someone has a strong position of Mars, and they tend to be assertive and they tend to be athletic. Someone has a weak position of Mars, and they want to sit in front of a screen for 12 to 15 hours a day. And similar for Jupiter. Jupiter would say, or all the planets, Jupiter would say, oh yeah, money comes to me easily. I must always be blessed by God. And someone else says, oh, I never have 2 cents to rub together. I must be cursed by the devil. When we look into their charts and we see Jupiter's in a strong position of growth and beauty and abundance, or Jupiter's in a weak position, like, for instance, being born with Jupiter in Capricorn, that person is going to work all their lives for every single penny, and they're going to have to squeeze that nickel twice. Whereas Jupiter in Cancer, they're going to fall into money even when they're drunk.
In your view, what's the relationship between astrology and spirit and spirituality?
I really do believe that since we are spirits living in the material world, since we truly are spirits that inhabit a physical form, that the beginning of spirit is the beginning of turning towards the light. And when we're spit out of the womb, we are blinded by that first encounter with light, and we scream. And that encounter with light and density is how spirit informs matter, and how matter begins to teach spirit the evolution, the education of how to live in this world, being a spiritual being. So astrology really, on a spiritual level, brings the light from a much higher source down to a dense plane. In other words, the earth is a place without much light. What I mean by that is very simple. We have to act before we have sufficient knowledge. That's how people make money at the stock market. That's how people get married and divorced. That's how people have children. We have to act before sufficient knowledge. That circle of light called the chart brings light from an area that's a much higher level of knowledge, logos, that is truly a place of light, a place of knowledge, not action. So when we leave this body, we will go to a place of light, hopefully, but it won't be as active as this place is, this density is, because since there's no such thing as a car in a higher level, a higher plane, you can't get hit by a car and be hurt, because there's no physical form to get hurt and there's no car to run into anything. Here, one small move off the table and I fall into the floor, and I know I get feedback immediately. So spirituality and spirit has to do with espiritu, or respire, to breathe in this world. And that's the spark, the life force that the Chinese call the qi. And that's why the Buddhists say it's very difficult to take on a body. It's like a giant turtle surfacing for air and then swimming down into a deep, cold area. So each life is like a turtle surfacing for air, saying, oh yes, there's a lot of light here, and then diving down to where the food might be wealthy and rich and lots of green algae to eat, but the light and the pressure are enormous. So that's what I understand about spirituality. And if we understand that there is something around a feedback mechanism, you can call that karma, then our actions have meaning. You bounce the ball against the wall, it comes back. That's karma. So if we're looking for justice in this world, it can happen in this life. It certainly will happen over lives.
Correct. And you are saying that pain, suffering, or happiness and wealth can be not necessarily predicted, but we can have a better understanding if we look at it from an astrological point of view.
Very well said. Very well said. So we are, as astrologers, we are fighting a kind of battle that many other professionals perhaps don't have to fight because our young culture is not European. We are mistaken for fortune tellers. So we're not fortune tellers. We are people who predict trends. And if you think of a trend, weather is a trend that turns into climate. So if I give a client a weather report on their health cycle, for instance, one of my clients he called in with a very sore knee, and I looked at the cycle and the planets where they were around his horoscope, and I said, "You got hurt on the 17th of January." He said, "How'd you know that?" And I said, "You'll heal by the third week of February and I said, "You got hurt in your knee, is that correct?" And he was a Capricorn, which is all about the knees. So the idea of looking at a trend like a weather person looks at a trend is a cycle of wellness, a cycle of fertility, a cycle of strength in the body and weakness in the body is a language written in the stars. So the thing I try and keep my clients aware of is that during your birthday cycle, at least the 10 weeks after your birthday, you are Superman or Superwoman. You're strongest during the yearly cycle. Other times of the year, like 6 months after your birthday, I advise people not to have electional surgery. Don't have surgery you don't need because the recovery will be slow and your body is depleted. I call that a trend, not fortune telling. So money has a trend, love has a trend, and a cycle, and connections have cycles and trends. Someone without a lot of fire in their chart is going to be good at persisting, for instance, and someone with a lot of fire in their chart is going to have a good time insisting because fire initiates. So these are all symbols, and it takes a long time. The first 2 years of studying astrology could be really deadly boring because you're trying to learn a language. So, when I'm stumbling over French, when I'm stumbling over Greek, I'm, saying, "Oh my God, I'll never get this," because there's a million words in this language and I know 3. And I'm pronouncing them badly. So the issue around learning astrology is that people sometimes have the impression that they can pick it up over a weekend. And here I am 40 years later, still studying astrology.
Interesting. And in fact, because you mentioned an example, I can tell you that my wife, you told my wife that she's going to have a hard time in February of this year, 2020. And indeed, she had a very tough February, and, and now she's out of the woods. And I can confirm that what you said was true.
I hope she's okay.
So also going back in history, and yeah, she's fine now. Thank you. Many thousands years ago, especially the Egyptians, used astrology very much in their daily life. I think they were doing everything based on astrological cycles and what the high priests were telling to the king and the pharaoh and the minions. But I think these days we don't use the same knowledge in the same way. We're kind of afraid to apply the same concept, even if they hold true until now. I mean, after so many thousands of years. What do you think that's the case?
Well, it's a complex issue. Number one, we're all looking down at our screens. No one's looking up at the sky. And number two, the skies are not the skies of the pharaohs, because the skies of the pharaohs were dark. So we're not looking up and noticing. Basically, people in agricultural cycles, and perhaps before, had years and decades to stare at things, to look at things, to examine things. So there are many, many cultures everywhere that know the birds and they know the fish, and they know the cycles. They can read the waves to tell you what's going to go on with many things. And it's because they're spending generations staring at their natural environment. We expect everything to happen in 20 seconds or less. It's a very glittery, glitzy time. in which we expect immediate results. You push a button and you're in Vietnam. You push a button and you're in Paris. You push a button and you're in Buenos Aires. So that's not the nature of reality. That's the nature of computer screens. And here we are in the COVID cycle, spending much more of our time, sort of expecting something to happen quickly. So can I get back to work this week? And the economy go full diesel back to work? And many experts are saying, please don't die. Let's wait until this thing clears up. Okay, so the idea that things take time and that there is a recurring cycle and there are times to wait is very important. And our culture is just simply a culture of velocity over caffeination. Caffeine's not bad. And over adrenalized, and adrenal reactions are not bad. It's just simply that our culture wants everything to happen now and sooner than now. So it's a young culture. Perhaps the Europeans and people in the Far East understand, even though they're becoming Westerners, they understand that things take time, and that perhaps in a Mars cycle you can get hurt right now, and astrologer can maybe be helpful to help you not get hurt right now. Or you've had a discouraging cycle in life in which nothing worked very well, and then I look into your chart, an astrologer looks at your chart and says, oh, this cycle is over. And if you're discouraged, you're not going to take advantage of a brand new rebirth of health, life, and money, because you've been kicked a lot, and maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades. So with astrology, it's the helpful art. I'm not sure science. Science is a very tricky word to use here, but it's a helpful craft in which we can say, all right, so that horrid time in your life has burned through like William Blake's painting Brand New Day. This truly is a brand new cycle in your life. And, depression is a huge part of our culture. We attribute that to Saturn. Saturn's all about sitting in the cave and not being able to find an immediate exit. So, among other things. So the issue around why that would happen, that's separate. But what you and I are facing often in our lives is this toothache, is this flat tire, is this polio, is this virus ever going to come to an end? And even if we didn't study astrology, we would know that pain is temporary. Is a unique one for human beings, because when we're in pain, the mind can jump to the conclusion that pain lasts forever. And pain is temporary. And an astrologer can be useful, helpful in noticing that this cycle of perhaps horror even, or just simply household pain, is coming to an end. Whereas the mind says, I better not ever trust anyone with my heart or my money, because I crashed and burned so badly, and maybe God has it in for me, or the angel of God hates me. And those are ways the mind tricks us into becoming our own worst enemy. And astrology really is about being aware of the passage of time. And because the time changes things, we can say with some alacrity that it's a different cycle.
And going back to an early statement of yours, are you saying that there is no science in astrology?
Good question. So science, the word science is a French word from the Greek. And what it means essentially in the original Greek is to break apart. So you smash an atom, you smash a proton to see what's inside of it. That's science. And you carefully record it. Okay, that's science. And then you say, oh, I can reproduce these results. Every time I smash this proton, I get this. Okay, so that's reproducible results. And what we're doing in astrology is we're saying, oh, well, you're a unique human being, even though you might be an Aries, even though you might be a Pisces, and your background is not the same as every Piscean. So astrology really is the mother or the father of all sciences, but it's not science. It's perhaps proto-science, or something else that really does engender people looking more deeply into how the physical world, physics, sort of behaves in a certain way. Now, there is a school of astrology called quantum astrology, which says that the world is really not comprehensible through normal cycles of, let's say, the seasons. So let's look to places like genetics. Let's look to places like quantum physics to say, well, lots of information is packed into a very small packet called a quanta. Perhaps that's how astrology works. So there's no consensus. There's no homogeneity around the science or the art or the craft of astrology. I'm more inclined to say that astrology is built around a human universe, and it's built around what empirically would be called a lie. And that lie is the sun revolves around the earth.
Okay.
So empirically, that's correct. The sun I'm sorry, that's an error. The sun does not revolve around the earth. Galileo said so. He must be right. The Pope didn't like it very much, but not unless it was true. The earth revolves around the sun. But for our human universe, the sun seems to revolve around our lives. So astrology is built on the human center. So we can certainly, as astrologers, sort of claim our brotherhood with psychologists. Psychology is perhaps 90 years old. Freud, Adler, 120 years old. Astrology is 10,000 years old. So who's the parent? Astrology is the parent.
Yeah.
So, and the 400-year-old cycle of science, beginning with Galileo and Harvey, the circulation of blood, really was about looking at the physical world and taking a hammer to it. So there's the teenager science saying to the old parent, hey, you're an idiot, you know nothing. Just like every teenager says to every parent. So we are really in a proto-science cycle where the original observer of physical and emotional and spiritual cycles. So it's an origin, it's a guiding principle, it's an organizing principle, but that doesn't make it science. And it doesn't make it not science either, you see?
Yeah. A while back, you mentioned to me about the great conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter. What does it mean for the world economy?
Well, we're in what we astrologers call a balsamic cycle now, which means a cycle of decay, a cycle of closing, a cycle of ending the old way of doing things. So every 19 3/4 years, 20 years if you like, Jupiter in his path around the sun catches up to slower moving Saturn. And when that happens, as it happened in the year 2000, 20 years ago, the economy breaks down. First of all, everyone gets wildly crazy optimistic about money and investing and everything going giddily, manically well. And then things go back to a normal cycle that bottoms out and then begins again. So if you look at the crash of 1929, this was exactly a Jupiter-Saturn cycle where people went nuts, went crazy with optimism, and then the bottom fell out. And then the realistic dirty 30s was a slow recovery. So every 19 3/4 years, you can actually, economists use this cycle. They don't call it astrology, but they consult us. Because, it's embarrassing to say, oh, my astrologer said, because, you're talking to a bean counter, perhaps. And I don't know many bean counters who are also astrologers, but, it can happen. So the cycle of 20 years of the economy collapsing and being realistically reborn, anyone can look this up. Anyone can look this up and say, oh, right, that was a 20-year cycle. And there's 13 more of them. There's 106 more of them. So we're really looking at the Jupiter being the new king, overthrowing Saturn, the old king. So every time he catches up, the old king loses his throne, and the new king says, we're going to do things in a different way here because there's ashes behind us. So again, these planets aren't making something happen. They're noticing something does happen. Now, in 2008, if I may, that was the half part of this. That was actually 9.5 years in the cycle. And of course, things melted down. So that's right on track. Now, this isn't happening once or twice. It's reoccurring vibrantly during the entire industrial era, every 20 years. So no one has to believe in astrology. All you have to do is be willing to look up the cycle. And there it is. It's more or less black and white. So I'm glad you brought that up, because this is exactly how astrology is helpful in saying, in the year 2000, I advised all my clients in tech and tech stock, please by April, get the hell out of Dodge, because things are going to collapse for a while. And my clients who listened actually did very well. Many of the people who I talked to, not all of them, were skeptical of astrology, and they lost their shirts. Now, again, this is not because I'm a magician. It's because I've studied something for a very long time that seems to be speaking to us. So the speaking sky is a relevant way of saying this is a cycle of growth, this is a cycle of reduction and condensation, this is a cycle of renewal, but something has to die. So right now, we're in a dying cycle of the old way of doing things. Just this past week, Claudiu, I was noticing that electric-powered 18-wheel trucks will be coming onto the road in 2021. It's a new world. People who run these big rigs, companies who run these big rigs, want them because they save tons of money and they're good for the environment. So keep in mind that we are now on the verge of a new world, and the old world's not going gently into that good night.
And how long this downturn in the economy will last? You know?
We'll definitely see a brand new spark of renewal by February, March, and April, and this will not be overnight.
You mean 2021?
2021, yes. So it will not be overnight. It will be a gradual rebirth out of the ashes of the old. And there will be things that, of course, don't change. But in the main, we're trying not to, as a culture, overcome the first cycle of COVID. So the second cycle becomes far worse if it reappears. So, I understand people's desperation. And I do want the economy to shift into a caring economy, because if you take things like welfare and unemployment checks and all the other things that support people without work, and look at that number, and then say, all right, so what would it cost to have a universal payment for people, a universal income? It might be 5% more than everything we're doing right now. And that's easily absorbed by the economy. So what I'm saying to you is that people right now can't feed their children. And they're going to be very angry about that. And perhaps that's a good thing, because what we did in parts of Africa, and maybe even North Korea and certainly Iran, was we gave these people cellular data. We gave them the internet, and they realized they were unhappy.
Yes.
And that changed things. So right now we're in a sunset cycle. The sun's going down on the old economy, and the new economy doesn't have to be like this. And we are an 11th hour species. We learn from disaster. We have seatbelts, correct, for our cars. How did that happen? Hundreds of thousands of people died on the road.
Yes, and in fact, I recently wrote in my upcoming book, Crystal Cloud, that we prefer to take care of the aftermath and spend more time and energy than prepare for a disaster, which is, counterintuitive based on our experience and everything we've done in the past. We should prepare instead of dealing with the aftermath, like Katrina and any other hurricane or, natural disaster. It's like we don't want to learn anything from previous experiences. And in the astrology, it's accumulated knowledge of thousands and thousands of years, which one can tap into by using someone like you, these type of services. And still people are reticent, and they don't want to kind of face their future and better themselves.
Well said. Well said. In the 60s, there was a fight between two outer planets. There was a fight between Saturn, which is stability and conservatism and reactionary issues, and kleptocracy, putting your hand in someone else's pocket and saying, I didn't do that. And that was the 60s riots in France and in the US and Canada. And the whole revolution of let's take care of each other. No, let's keep things back the way they were. That same cycle of Saturn and Uranus is your revolution, is happening now. So the old pullback, the old cycle of, let's keep Vladimir Putin employed for the next 30 years, that old cycle of kleptocracy, pulling things back to the way they were through fear, is Saturn, symbolically, and the revolution to make things brand new and to equalize everyone's access to health and to wealth, that's Uranus, which is revolution. So the more these planets show us that this is a struggle, the more the old way is defended in a militaristic style. So we're not going gently into the new cycle, but we are going into the new cycle. And the fortunate thing about our culture, in other words, our culture as a mass, is we do learn from plane crashes. We do learn from not having seatbelts. We do learn from the epidemics of the past. So the Justinian plague was the first plague to sweep Europe, and it killed 750,000 people. And we did find out there were survivors, and I was wondering, how were there survivors? The survivors were people who gained an immunity to the bacteria, and the same cycles were in the sky in the Justinian plague and the plague of the Middle Ages that we're having now. Now we're having a virus, not a bacteria, but we don't have to learn from having rats eat our bread and sleep in our beds with us. We don't have to learn from not knowing how to wash and practice hygiene. So we're in a much better position to learn quickly from what goes wrong. So that's quite encouraging.
The expectation is that this crash will be much bigger than the 2008-2009 crash. That means you're going to go into a depression, and the inflation and all that kind of economical drawback. Do you expect another crash in the next 20 years, or that cycle will extend to 30 or 40 years?
Well, in astrology, we say nothing is inevitable until after it happens. So are we willing to learn as a culture? An individual is smart. Maybe sometimes people, a mass, a group is stupid. In other words, Claudiu, no one's ever seen a mob run across the street to do a good deed. A person might do that, but maybe a mob won't. So the more we have a mob mentality, in other words, someone in power saying, now you will be afraid. And then we say, yes, I will obey. We will be afraid because you say we should be afraid. The more we have that, the more this cycle will entrench and repeat in 20 years. Now, are we better off with education? That's the key. The key is the old axiom of education is empowering. So we're now beginning. You and I and the people around us, we have more wealth than Croesus. We have more wealth than Darius, the king of Persia. Why? Because if they had a toothache, they died.
Right.
If they fell off a horse, they died. So we have 10,000 ways of healing body, mind, and spirit now. So I'm very hopeful that we're learning much more quickly because of information being ubiquitous. So maybe the new university that many of us are in as an entire culture is called the internet. Perhaps that's true. Also, there's going to be that dark side in which people want to gobble up conspiracy theories. And the problem with that, simply put, is that we have very, 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 very big brains and very little idea what to do with them. Our brains are pattern making. We are pattern making animals, pattern seeing animals. So COVID-19, we're saying, oh, it's basically G5 that's killing people. As G5 comes in, it's going to do something to the body, mind, and the brain. And really, these things will always crop up because people are taught to feel things rather than think things. Feelings aren't wrong. They're just 25% of our brain. In astrology, we call this fire and water. Water is about flowing with what our family says is true, and flowing to music. And fire is about, right now I want an answer. Right now things have to be different. So the water and fire part of our culture, in other words, intuition and feeling, is once again sort of saying, I'm the master, I'm in charge. Whereas the thinking and the measuring part of our culture, in the Jungian sense, is saying, let's take a hard, cold look at this and see what's really going on. So we will come to our senses as this current cultural cycle finally burns itself through, which will be at the end of this year. Now, is it going to be a mass awakening? Probably not. But is it going to be better than it used to be? Yes, probably that, because information is more available.
And it seems that we are both on the same plane here, that an awakening has to happen, even if it's, let's say, 5%, 10%, or whatever the percentage. But that type of awakening really has to happen in order for us to shift to the next level of consciousness. And as they say, if you're a certain level of vibration, then you can match a higher number of people which don't have the same vibration as you have. So that's the balance between, dark and light, or whatever you want to call it.
There are many. I certainly agree that we are the battleground between dark and light, and the darkness really isn't the enemy. It's an energizer. So in William Blake's Marriage of Heaven and Hell, finally heaven and hell get together and they start cooperating, and heaven greatly benefits. Why? Because people in hell, the dark forces, have all the energy. What do the angels do? They play the harp. They sit around on clouds and take messages from the white man in a beard. So the issue around what hell offers us is, hell is the machinery. It's the diesel engine of action. And we don't actually see it for what it is, because we've been, and this is no one's fault really, we've been inculcated with making the rainbow into black and white.
Yes.
Really, the rainbow has so many colors. And as Foucault said, yes, I'm going to quote Foucault, the world is a harmless enigma, and we've made it harmful with our superstitions.
Correct. And it was explained to me from two different separate sources that we have to embrace our darkness, because darkness is inside us as well. We have both light and dark. And as long as we reject it, this is when it's going to affect us. But when we offer it love, and when we embrace it and accept it, then it's ours, and we know how to deal with it. And it's much better to live with the darkness we know and the darkness we accept than with a different type of darkness.
Well said. Well said. This is the meaning of horror movies and war movies, because we're actually watching theater. We're not watching people actually getting killed. So correct. This is an Aristotelian view of saying that all this violence is cathartic, because it's theatrical. It's not actually the bloodshed of children. So there is a way for us to experience our more Mars-like, more, if you will, like primitive, competitive, murderous nature without anyone coming to harm. And theater really does supply that. So why do people go to, Alfred Hitchcock said, I can't imagine why people go to be frightened in movies. And of course, it's controllable.
Yes. And we all, based on a Hindu teachings, we all live on a Maya, which is the cosmic illusion. And then you have Aditya, which is the personal illusion of each individual. So we have to burn through that in order to get to the other side of the tunnel, see the light, and understand that we live forever. We don't die. It's just the physical body who dies. And if you have that type of understanding, then life will be much easier, and you won't put everything, to the heart and take it hard to your body to make it suffer.
Well said. Well said. When I'm talking to my clients after the pain is beginning to subside, because they should not. I really don't want a client to come to me when they're screaming with pain, because they're surviving. They're fighting for every breath, and of course that's not a place to contemplate the cycles. So I will, when they're in that upward cycle of reflecting on pain or loss, for instance. And they say, this has been a very difficult time. I might say to them, and I often have, so what are your plans for your next 500 lives? And that tends to put pain in this life into some kind of perspective. So the idea that we're spirits that can't be destroyed and that we're evolving through matter temporarily is very important, because it does reveal that what we take from the earth will be given back, and what is essentially us cannot be taken ever from us. And I don't want this to be cold comfort. I want it to be part of a healing process. And that's very important. It's very important to honor a person's pain rather than saying, what did you do wrong? And there are smokers who are, having lung surgery, and then it's obvious to them what they did wrong. So they don't have to be someone who throws salt into their wound. And of course, that's quite immature and arrogant. But if they want to, if an ex-smoker wants to come to me and saying, so I really don't want to fall back into the habit again, I can be helpful. So we're in a strange position, spiritually speaking, because there are many of us who honor pain and honor the journey towards some kind of excess that reveals something. The journey of excess, as Blake said, the journey of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. And I don't want to reduce that to saying, look, you're screwing up your marriage, you're screwing up your life, unless the student is perfectly poised for that revelation at that moment.
Yes.
So if they're not, then I'm just one more person wagging a finger at them, just like every person who's beaten them up emotionally, spiritually, and physically all of their lives. And if they're having that moment of clarity, it's a perfect time to surgically, spiritually insert a new concept and say, now let's find out what part of your cycle renews you and gives you a love of your life, or a love of the sacred, which is your life. So it's very important to understand that people don't change until they're ready. We can't change it. We really can't change until we're ready. And that as we evolve as spirits through many lives, very often, most often, those lives will get more challenging. Why is that? Because if I said, are you sure you know how to tie your shoe? You're going to laugh. Because when you were a year and a half old, 2 years old, you mastered that shoe. You mastered that lace. And there are many people right now as adults who are just at that level. And there are many people who say, oh, give me a better challenge than tying my shoe because I'm 43 years old. So that's why I think lives tend to get more challenging as we evolve as spirits through matter.
And because sometimes we live this life with attachments. As you said, could be smoking, could be alcohol, could be anything else, because we might want a fortune and we didn't make the fortune in this lifetime, and we come back, aiming to make more money and achieve, get a bigger house, nicer car, or whatever we want. So that could be another cause of the pain we feel in that particular lifetime.
When you bring in the life of spirit in that context, you inspire me to take the metaphor a bit further and perhaps point out that it's maybe not desire that is the problem, it's the attachment to desire that's a problem. It's nice to want a better house. It's a very good thing to want a better house. It's a very good thing to want a better body. It's a good thing to want better nutrition. It's a good thing to want the pleasures that a physical journey with your spouse, my spouse, can have, because we're also bodies. So that's real important. That those are the fire of desires. Sorry for the rhyme, but when we get attached to that, when we say, I want to feel again as good as I once felt the first time I used heroin, that's a problem. I'll do anything to feel that good again. And, because people have been in pain, or people have been, needing to learn from pain, perhaps, they're going to indulge in repetition of a lesson until that lesson is learned. In astrology, that's called Chiron. Chiron is a large asteroid that is circulating the sun between Saturn, which is the traditional way of doing things, and Uranus, which is breaking things up into a new revolution. And right in the middle is the planetoid, the Plutoid, Chiron, saying, oh, by the way, we'll repeat this lesson, you'll repeat this lesson until you get it. So some people get the lesson in an hour, some people get the same lesson in 5 lifetimes. We're all in school. So the important part of spirit is we're all in school. When I realized that in my past life, perhaps I was middle management for Genghis Khan, it's a little bit easier to understand someone's first 3 levels of existence, and that's all they know. Do I exist? Do I survive? Are you in my way? Can I take what you have? That was what we call the first 3 levels of existence. And we're all, each one of us spiritually is living, each one of us is a high rise with 10,000 stories in it, for instance. And it's a great view at the top. And many people think they have to live in the first 3 stories of that 10,000 story building, because the rest of those stories in that landscape, that high rise, they're empty. They're there, but they're empty.
Yeah, and I read that there are great shamans in the time of Genghis Khan. So he had very good advice.
Yes, and he set up a tolerant society after he destroyed everything. So out of destruction comes creation. And what happens in these historic cycles is that the old culture gets corrupt, and everyone pays too many taxes, and everyone has no power. And the new vital culture sweeps in, like the Vikings or the Mongols, and becomes the new established culture.
Yes.
So those are cycles of history.
So for a regular person like me, when do you think it's better to make a leap of faith and let go of some long cherished illusion?
Perhaps there's 2 ways to do this. We can entertain the mind and say, who and what gets hurt if I persist in this action? Seeing an astrologer certainly can lift the veil, as we say in our profession. And number 2, the way that we can actually evolve is by sort of allowing ourselves to go through the darkness and say, well, I was raised to be a killer, so that's the profession that I know. And then over the arc of justice called karma, pay that down over many lives by being killed because I was a killer. So that's also a way of healing oneself. I prefer, of course, the first, and I've often admitted to my wife, said to my wife, the problem with me is I learn by making mistakes. I don't learn by other people's mistakes.
Yes, true.
And I think that's a universal claim, isn't it?
Yes.
That sometimes we have to make our own mistakes.
Yes, and again, I mentioned before in my interviews, I cannot convince a person that I'm right on a subject or about one of my experiences unless he experiences the same thing on his own. I can get blue to my face trying to convince him, and he will never be convinced. He has to have that spiritual, either is a physical experience, a spiritual experience. Only then he will change his mind, and is that shift in person's mentality that will take him on his own path.
Well said indeed. There's a way I have of sort of paraphrasing this that you just described so well. And my way of looking at this is to say that the ego will take up all the place in the psyche, not taken up by knowledge. Now, people find that opaque, but it's really quite simple. If I know that this action is going to hurt somebody I love, then I've taken a step towards knowledge. If I say I don't care, then I've allowed the gas called ego to fill up my psyche, and consciousness will eventually grow out of that, but it will take a different path to grow. So all the space in our brains, our psyche, not taken up by knowledge, will be taken up by ego. And ego says, you're in my way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Ego came up in the discussion almost on every single interview I've had so far. So it's quite interesting. So, Mike, during your astrological quest and search and readings, have you encountered any energy beings who help you with your readings, or in any other way, or how do you do that?
Certainly, I've had what we might term spiritual experiences. I've had times when a door seemed to be magically opening for me, and I've had people give me some insight into my own process that really wiped away days, weeks, years, and maybe even decades of ignorance and pain. So, to give you one example, when I first came to this country, I'm originally from the United States. As a war resister, I was 19 years old and didn't know anyone, and had to take a job to feed my family that was available. And I worked for a very cruel man who overworked his employees, and we worked 70 or 80 hours a week, and we were paid a pittance. And things got worse because he was quite a little tyrant, and it was the only job I could have because I was 19 and penniless and basically friendless. And that cycle fulfilled itself with a lot of horror. And a year later, I was in between jobs, walking the street with nothing but ashes behind me. And I looked at a red brick building, and it was a bookstore. It was called the University of Toronto Bookstore. It was a squat, ugly red brick building. And I said to myself, why don't I go in there and ask for a job? And a little voice inside some part of my psyche says, yes, why don't you? And literally I was hired in the same day.
Nice.
So a cycle of university and learning replaced a cycle of basically human slavery. Because, I was an immigrant and liable to be easily exploited, because, immigrants are often exploited before they, get to a place where things are better. Now, I hadn't studied astrology as much then as I do now, because that was basically 45 years ago. But it was a Jupiter cycle. It was a Jupiter cycle replacing a Saturn cycle. So I can give you many instances. We all have many instances of why didn't I step in front of that bus?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't I get on that plane? Why didn't I marry that person? Or why did I? And suddenly you begin to see that we're a very small part of a much more helpful, much more protective cycle that seems in odd times, not measurable times, to be there for us. In astrology, we call that Neptune. Neptune is the fog and the mystery of living. And also, as you pointed out earlier, the thing called Maya. I've come to realize in my own life that Maya isn't the idea that this table is an illusion. The illusion is that I call it a table.
Right. Yes. Mike, we're approaching the end of the interview. How can people reach out and make an appointment with you and benefit from your knowledge?
My website is Michael Zizis. Just type in my name. It's Zizis. It's a Greek word. Zizis, Z-I-Z-I-S, is a Greek word, and I have one of the few pagan names from Greece. Most of the names from Greece now, I don't speak a word of Greek, by the way, but most of the names from Greek now end in polos, and that's a Christianized form of our pagan names. Polos means the city, and when the priests were trying to recover the Greek nature from the Turks, They said, "Oh, you're not Zizis anymore. You're Zizisopoulos," which means Michael who remembers the city, Zizis who remembers the city. And to the Greeks, there was only one city. It was called Constantinople, the city of God. So it's very simple to remember my name: 2 Z's, 2 I's, 1 S. So that's important. And if you Google astrologers in Ontario, I'll come up. If you Google astrologers in the world, I will probably show up. So it's very easy. You don't even have to know how to spell my name. And it's very easy to find me because if I was Smith or Jones, it would be very difficult to find me. But fortunately, a name that I cursed as a child is a true blessing in this life because very few people have the name Zizis. So that's an easy way to find me.
Well, I'll be sure that all your contacts will be in the description at this interview. Anything else you want to add?
Well, firstly, you've made this a very fluid and numinous interview, so I thank you for that. And secondarily, it doesn't have to get bad before people consult their astrologer. Certainly, I'm here to help foster perhaps a good cycle to get better, and I'm here to do what I can to help you trend away from unfortunate times and lessen the pain if I can. So I'm on the wheel of karma. Everyone's on the wheel of karma. So I can only see what I can see. But the issue is that some of us are in the business of lifting the veil. Yes. That doesn't mean life won't be difficult. It should be difficult. It should be difficult. It does mean that there's a certain way to perceive suffering that changes everything. So thank you so much, Claudiu. It's been a true honor.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this interview. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell so you will be announced as soon as another interview will be posted. Until next time, love and gratitude.
Thank you.